Hey, it's Jay back again for another one. And tonight I have with me,
Sabrina.
how are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good, good. Glad to have you back. So, what you been up to?
Not much, just going to museums and galleries and all the good stuff and, all the good stuff that artists do. Just trying to stay in perspective of what I really enjoy doing and, all of that. How
Yeah.
about you?
Well, the same. Trying to work it out, trying to find ways to express. Sometimes it switches up. I always try to find different ways because sometimes the current life may not be feasible to being able to do certain kind of things, and so you have to find other ways to express that fits your life. And sometimes you have more time, you can sit back and do certain kind of things. The other time you have less time, so you got to find a shortcut of expression that's going to be able to be packaged in a certain kind of way and done in a limited amount of time. So I'm always trying to use creativity to find out what those things are that are still part of me that I could express in a different kind of way.
Hmm? Sounds good.
Always a journey. Being an artist is a lifestyle.
What do they say? It's a journey and not a destination.
That's right. That's right. I truly believe that. I truly believe
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a first. So normally we talk about movies and stuff and TV shows or maybe directors and stuff like that. Earlier this year, I did my first review on a musical, which was interesting.
Mm.
And so I'm happy to share this time because this is the first time I did a conversation about a art exhibition, which is funny because we were both artists and I don't think I ever really talked about art on any of
That's
my
funny.
podcasts. I don't even know if I even told people I'm an artist unless they just know me already. I don't even, huh? I'm an artist. For those who only know me from the podcast, I'm an artist. That's funny.
That that is funny because I think I thought about that too. Like, I don't remember seeing anything that you've done related to art. So I wasn't crazy then. It's true.
Yeah, I kind of, either keep it to myself or it's presented through something else, but I don't think that I've actually just spoken about that, which is interesting. But for another time. Tonight we're talking about somebody else.
Exactly.
So Kehinde, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Kehinde Wiley. Now, I heard about this show. I had planned to go, but didn't get to it because I was tied up with other things. You brought it up to me again, which I thought was cool because I would have fooled around and missed the exhibition because time goes like that. So thank you for always keeping me in the loop, even though I don't hardly be in the loop as much as I used to. You always kind of reach out, let me know what's going on, and I truly appreciate that.
I try.
Just appreciate it. And so, going out to the museum to check out the exhibition, have a day of taking in some art and reflection and community and stuff like that. So, I'm familiar with his work. I remember when he came out. To me, he was almost kind of like a modern Basquiat as far as having things that kind of grab the voice of the moment, the culture, because his stuff is, even though it's like paintings that was kind of like reminiscent of the old masters paintings and stuff, he did his interpretation using, kind of like the hip hop culture, kind of, fed that into it. And so it was like, you see, black boys and girls looking like royalty, but in our garb as far as the styles and stuff that's worn today, the sneakers and all that kind of stuff and the different high-end brands and things like that. So he would do his interpretation of it. And then what really people kind of will probably forever know him for is doing the portrait of Obama. So he was selected by Obama to do his portrait. And so folks will probably really know him for that. Yeah. So what did you know of him before this?
So, like you just mentioned, like most folks, my first encounter, if you will, with him was the Obama portrait. And my family and I went to the African American Museum in DC. We went to go to the African American Museum, but we went to the Portrait Museum first, which I highly recommend. The
Okay.
Portrait Museum. So that's where the Obama portraits were. So, we went in, we saw Michelle first because everybody was really talking about Michelle.
Yeah, they were.
Um, in several different ways. Some folks didn't like the scale of it, the colors and contrasts and all of that. So we checked that out, and then he was in the Hall of Presidents. So you kind of go through all of them, which was actually pretty cool because they were all just portraits,
Yeah.
different kind of muted tones and kind of just uninteresting. And then you come around the corner and his was like pow, like you saw it on TV, but you see it in person and it's even better. And they had it corded off with a velvet rope so you couldn't actually go up and touch it and all of that.
Right.
But it was separate from everything else. And it was great, to see it in person was really great. So this time around, the portraits came to De Young, and I took my son and his girlfriend and my mom to see it. Even though my mom and I had already seen it, I wanted to see what their take on it was, and they basically, they enjoyed it, because it was Michelle and Obama, and it was packed. You couldn't get close. You had to kind of squeeze your way in there. It was packed. People just stood there staring at it for a while. So, and then he's also had a couple of portraits at the museum in Sacramento.
Really?
So I saw one of his there before, and it was kind of it wasn't inside, if you will, the space of the gallery is kind of like in a hall, and it was something that made you stop, and just kind of study it. It wasn't a huge scale, but it was a scale that you were like face to face, and as an artist, we're looking at the details of everything. So we're gonna stand there for a while and just try to figure out, how he came up with all these techniques and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I kind of had, had a couple of encounters with his work, and then with this one, the way that I came in was probably backwards because I came in the area where the Obama portraits were, which is where the horse was. Remember that that part of the exhibit?
Yeah.
So I came in through there, and it was massive. It was breathtaking, to walk in and see that sculpture and the magnitude of it and the scale of it. And, you just kind of walk around the whole thing and kind of stop at like 4 different points and kind of discover new things that are happening, with everything that's going on with that particular sculpture. So that was the first impression I got of the exhibit, was the horse.
So, okay, so the exhibit in San Francisco, you said the first thing that really stood out to you was the horse?
Right.
Okay, that was a powerful piece. It was interesting because it was kind of tucked away, like you didn't know to keep kind of going further out. It's in a room that you probably wouldn't think to check in necessarily. Yeah, it was very powerful. It kind of tripped me out because it's one of those kind of things that maybe because of the sheer size and then not knowing what to expect, how you kind of see something, then you miss a big part of it, and you just kind of like catches you like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. You start kind of taking your time. You start kind of walking around and seeing the whole piece. It was very powerful, and it's funny because they have like a audio guided tour, and it kind of made a mention of like a lot of people not seeing the person laying on the horse and just seeing the horse, like us being trained to just see the horse and not the person on it. I never heard of that before, so I don't know if I agree with it or not. Because usually, if you see someone on a horse, you are seeing who's propped up and up on the horse. But in that situation, for the way he was laid out over the horse and stuff, yes, I did not. Because you're looking to see somebody up on it, sitting up, not laying across it. And so I think that kind of lent to me not noticing the figure laying across it in the beginning. But the size was huge, and it was beautifully done, very powerful, very striking. I took a moment just to kind of sit in there and check it out. It had like a little bench in there, and I kind of sat there and just kind of took it in. Yeah, it was very interesting.
I think also the lighting in the room as well. It was dark. And the focus was just on that sculpture. Made a difference. It set the mood in that sense.
Yeah, and I noticed the whole exhibit was kind of like that. It was almost kind of like a dark room with the
Hmm.
spotlight just on the artwork. How did you feel about that?
For that particular room, I thought it was necessary,
But the whole
because it
exhibit
was
is
just
kind
so
of,
big.
yeah, but the whole exhibit was kind of done in the same way.
I don't know. I went twice. And the first time, it's funny you said you listened to the audio. I didn't the first time. I
Okay.
just kind of walked through the museum, and I went back and did it the second time. Remember, I basically went backwards. I came in backwards. I came in where the sculpture was, and when I came out, there were more sculptures. So to be in the
Oh,
dark room and
okay.
then come out, and then it's still dark over the other pieces, it kind of set the tone for me right away, as
Okay.
opposed to coming in through the front and seeing this whole space is actually dark. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah, because I was kind of wondering. I thought it was powerful to see it that way, but then it also normally, I guess I never really seen an exhibit kind of quite done like that, so I wasn't for sure. And I guess what really made it stand out to me is when a friend of mine wanted a picture or front of one of the paintings, and the lighting's bad, and that's what really just like, oh, but it's not there for photo ops, so I understand. So I'm sure their concern wasn't good lighting for the people within the, walking around through the exhibit. But
Hmm.
I kind of, I thought it was interesting that it was as dark as it was throughout the exhibit. But that doesn't mean, and it doesn't take away from the perfect lighting they had on the actual pieces, because the pieces were lit nicely. Um,
Hmm.
if you were taking a picture of it, you have to really be careful for your angle because of that single light on it. It does, cast a glare across it depending on where you're standing. But as far as the image being well lit and everything, especially because of the sizes of the some of the images and stuff, they were very well lit.
I'm sure there's some kind of semblance behind it, but it wasn't
Yeah,
mentioned in the audio, which would have
yeah,
been nice. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
if it was just that it was to focus solely on the artwork, then of course that makes sense. But like you said, it wasn't dim. It was pretty dark.
hmm,
So there must be some thought behind it.
yeah, yeah. So it was a nice mixture of sculptures. Matter of fact, I didn't even know he did sculptures. So it was nice to see his
Hmm.
sculptures and stuff, and the size of them and things like that. They were very impressive. The paintings were very impressive as far as like the techniques and stuff like that. Beautiful technique. The colors, the palette, and everything. The sheer size of some of those were just, as an artist, like you might know how to paint something and how to layer something for painting, but it's almost so impressive that you even just wondering, like me and my friend, we were talking about, like, is that canvas one piece? And if it's one piece, how do you even get inside the, how do you get it in here? So it's just like,
Hmm.
it's almost like you're just respecting the skill set and also, how things are put together. Cause it takes a lot to, and as an artist, one thing you usually don't have enough of is space. So you almost just in awe of having a studio or a space that big to be able to express something that large. And so it
Hmm.
was just kind of funny as an artist. We were thinking like, wow, that one piece of that looking for seams or seeing if it was a couple of canvases put together, but it looked like one huge canvas. And it was just like, that's amazing. That's amazing.
I think that, like you said, the scale of the portraits were, breathtaking. To walk into a room and see that kind of work done on
Mhm.
that level, on that scale, and to be an image of a black person. I guess if you imagine just kind of standing in front of it and it being so huge like that, you could almost feel like you're a part of it. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it was so massive. But yet, you also took it in as in, like, well, what does this mean? What are they doing? Why are they laying down? Are they alive? Are they dead? Like, what's kind of going on? And for me, who just kind of ran into the museum and ran upstairs, I didn't run, but mosey my way upstairs without any kind of audio. Imagine what my experience was the first time. It was just basically coming up with my own perspectives, you
Okay.
know.
Okay. Even with the audio, I had my own perspective, and I don't think that I'll say this: the audio to me was kind of confirmation of what I was probably feeling and seeing. Yeah, because the audio starts I think it starts on a sculpture, even though a painting is presented first. And I can't. I guess the audio could give some understanding, but for me, it was just okay. It's funny sometimes when having critiques about certain things, and it can be taken a certain kind of way for other, for different reasons and stuff. But regardless, part of my issue is, I guess, and it's on me, is because of my expectations. I'll start with that. It was a expectation thing. Now, the stuff and the work I've seen of his was very positive. It was very Black culture in the best light. Almost I won't say Afrofuturism, but the poses, the royalty, the air of the images, just how people could be gaudy and have a whole bunch of stuff going on. It could be too much. Well, he would always seem to find a balance where he made that beautiful. Somebody would see them walking down the street and probably laugh and being like, what are you wearing? What are you doing? But he captured it in a way where it made sense, right? He made sense to what we see walking around, and out of context, it doesn't make sense. Like, it could look good on a music video, but not walking down the street, right? And so he seemed to have found that. And so I was thinking and trying to share with taking, friends and family to that exhibit, was to kind of share that upliftment of Black culture, more so like the hip hop culture kind of thing. And so to go in there and then see a young man laid out, and like I said, you can't really tell laid out from what. It's not necessarily, it's almost in, you've seen old masterpieces like that where they're kind of laid out and just kind of like, have this arched back, and, they don't look like they're in pain. They just kind of displayed out kind of thing. And then you see a statue that's kind of the same. And I was kind of like, huh? And then I looked a little further and I saw this woman in, these white flowers or something like that. And her eyes are open. Like, okay. Because I'm starting to think that, like these, I'm saying sleep because I had no way to confirm it. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of sleeping kind of hard, but okay, they could be sleep. And then I see the woman, her eyes open. Okay, so it's not a, but as I went along, I kept seeing more and more laid out and more obviously to me at a certain point. And early on, I didn't seem to sleep anymore. And so as I kept going and seeing more and more of it, it just got heavy real quick. It got hard real quick. And when I even tried to listen to the audio to kind of get a little bit more perspective on it and whatnot, and that is what a lot of that stuff was kind of speaking to. And like I said, I'm not saying it was wrong, but I think it was a lot, and it was more than I was thinking I was going to get into at that moment. I'm very sensitive to stuff, and I usually try to be careful on what I listen to and watch and stuff like that. I got, like I'm not in a good mood or not in a good place, I don't watch a whole bunch of craziness. I don't listen to a whole bunch of craziness. I don't be around a whole bunch of things that's going to upset me or whatnot. I try to be conscious of that, because that really, it could be a lot. And it's very hard to protect yourself. A lot of that protection comes from you knowing who you are and how you are with things. And so the best thing is to be, is to not have yourself in situations that's going to, throw that off for you. And not saying I was necessarily traumatized from the work. I wasn't, but it was very heavy, very disturbing. And I would have had a different audience going with me to see that. And as it went along, it just got, more tragic looking, just more things. And they got larger and more obviously, to me, like they passed away. And then you're hearing some of the stuff, and you got, Oscar Grant's mom talking about her son being slain and stuff like this and all this stuff. And it's just like, and then the piece we talked about when we talked about first about the horse with the slain kid on there and stuff. And it was just like all this like death. And this part I felt was kind of messed up, but it was a part I went in, and I think it was like this, maybe the third or fourth room. And they had these display boxes built into the walls that looked like coffins. And they had bodies in there. Like, what is this? Like, why is this? And not that he can't have his own expression. He could do what he wants to. He's an artist. He got things he want to say, and that's what he wanted, how he want to say it. But I was not expecting to run in that. And when we first got there, we're all African American. So it was like, it was like 6 of us. And it was just like heavy. And we were walking and just checking out. And then you can see this one large statue of this black man, and you can't see his face. His head's turned down. And you see the cross chain hanging from his chest, and he's just laid out, and he's across this whole gallery floor. And there's another slain image of another slain black man also on the wall, and it's brilliantly painted. But he looked like he almost like his body was dumped. You know what I mean? It was almost like they dropped him in a ravine. And it wasn't like he was rotting or anything, or his Nikes was still clean. His shirt was not ripped up. He, wasn't a scar on his body, but he lays there broken, and it was a lot. But what really got me was looked like those coffins that was within the wall. And it was a lot. And then, so I was ready to get out of that room, and I went to the other room to go check out some more of the stuff, and it was almost kind of like more of the same. So when I looked up and more people was coming in, right, I saw the majority of the folks that was in there was white, right? And they're walking around, checking out, looking and stuff. And I was thinking like, man, and it's just like, I quickly felt a little uncomfortable, especially seeing the rest of the audience there. And not that they were, laughing or being dismissive or anything like that, but it's just almost kind of like, it's just interesting the attention certain things get, and it got to be in a certain kind of way. It got to be in a pretty glossy way, for some folks to take in and digest stuff, and but they don't want the ugly truth of it. It's kind of like you would give more attention to this exhibit than you would actually slaying black men and women, and to have it on display like that, and it's not offset with anything. I thought I kind of had the same issue a little bit with I think her name is Kara Walker, and she does like the silhouette stuff, like that's her expression, right? But the places she kind of goes with her art and stuff, it's kind of like, I just don't think we need help destroying our image or our place in things. I don't think that we need any more degradation of that. I think it's been done so many ways and for so long, and that a lot of stuff is, we're on autopilot. Even the best of us with the best minds and the creativity and pragmatic and all that other kind of stuff, we are still susceptible to those thoughts and views of us as a people. And so I don't, it's not like have anything against reality or trying to avoid reality or think like things got to be perfect or it can't be seen or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying for me, I don't need extra things leaning into that direction for me. And if it does, it better be making a good point that's going to be adding to making that thing correct that problem more so than just highlighting. There's a lot of highlighting. There's a lot of money in highlighting stuff, right? But not fixing. And so I don't like, my time for sitting in things that highlight things is kind of done. I like things that's going to be either an answer, a vision of getting past or better or something. But just to see the problem with no acknowledgement to how that came about or how to fix it, it's hard for me to swallow these days.
I get it.
No disrespect to the artist.
Yeah, I didn't, I felt a sense of sadness, and I stayed a little longer than I had, I expected to stay. And I did, similar to you, kind of watch, to see how people were reacting. I actually talked to, one of the, I don't know if they're, what do you call them, guards, to just kind of make sure you don't touch stuff and all of that.
Right.
I walked up to one of them, African-American woman, and, we started talking, and she was saying how, how moving it was for her and how she was observing, folks in the museum and their reactions to it. And, she said some people were saying it wasn't, it was impossible to create a portrait that way, that it had to be kind of like, fake in a way. And, she's an African-American woman, and, she was obviously, kind of affected in the sense of like, this is a artist that's well known that did the work, and that's your perspective of what this is. I did speak to someone else who is an educator, and she openly cried throughout the exhibit because, similar to what you were just saying, she's sensitive and she likes to be in the moment, meaning the glory of this whole exhibit. And she said, with that, this happens to her in other exhibits. If she's affected by something, she's not afraid to kind of reveal it in that moment. And she said, she'll get stares, she'll get people looking at her like, what's wrong with you? And then she gets a little bit of shame that comes in. And she'll kind of like remove herself and kind of go into the bathroom and finish her process. So I think that it's interesting to hear your perspective of it from that point of view, because I think I was so awestruck by, just like I said, the magnitude of it. And this is an African American artist, and he was at the De Young. And before I saw this exhibit, I saw the Faith Ringo one, and I was like, wow, De Young is like on it. They're really doing their thing here. Right. So I think I went in with that perspective too. I think that if we think about the symbolism of the room being dark, it was probably meant to be that way because it was to stir up the sentiments of grief. And I think that what you felt is probably what he probably wanted, and it didn't necessarily speak to it specifically for certain people. It was for anybody or everyone. Right. I think that, because I did a little, even from the audio, and me doing a little bit of research, it was based on George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the portraits on the wall, which, like you said, I didn't know he did sculpture, but that's the first thing I saw when I walked in his exhibit. And they were striking, but the sculptures were the most effective ones. Mm-hmm. Because the paintings were like, are they resting or are they dead? Because there's all these bright flowers, right, and all this stuff in the background, but the sculptures being on the floor and the scale, I don't even know how large they were, but I studied the length of it. Like, this is someone's like torso and legs, and like, this is a giant.
Yeah, it's a width of a little gallery. Then, yeah,
right. So on the floor has to be semblance of what you said, dead bodies. You know what I mean? Like, people being shot in the streets and on the floor. And then the tomb, if you're religious, you could think of it, in a different aspect. I don't know what that aspect necessarily is. I'm just paying attention to that some people might have looked at it, differently in different ways that we're even talking about. But it was a tomb to me. It was definitely a tomb. It was a casket or a tomb. And, I kind of studied that and, looked at, obviously it was a young man and, two young men in both of them. So I kind of studied, the techniques and how, the sculpture was put together. And then, like you said, that's the middle room, the large, gigantic body there. And then you go into the next room. And when you go into the next room, there's another one. But that sculpture matches the one on the wall. The one on the floor is a male and the one on the wall is a female. So it matches it. It just shows different genders, if you will, So you saw it twice. So you got to have two different ways of thinking about it, I guess. Is this beautiful? Is this person asleep? Is the one in the painting resting and the one on the floor has passed? So that might have been placed that way for that thought-provoking kind of measure too, to think of it like that. The first time I went, I was more like, yay, going to see his stuff, great, can't wait to see it. Was affected by it in a way that it was like, everybody needs to see this. Everyone needs to see it. I did stop at one point and just kind of stare at everything in the room. Yeah. And just kind of took all of it in, like looked around the room, like a panoramic view of everything that was kind of in that room, in that space, and how big it was. And then the second time I went, when I heard the audio, I mean, did it affect the first time I went? Not necessarily. It just gave more details. And the more details were basically talking about what you introduced at the beginning, his history of paralleling the European portraits and making them different people. And I think for me, that's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to his work, because I do not connect at all to, with those Western European portraits, or they don't
Yeah.
even have to be Western. It upsets me on the level that you just mentioned, that this one was upsetting to you. And I think I recognized that when I went to the museum, a whole area of, Western or the European portraits.
Right. Right.
They gave me that feeling that you got when you were just talking about his portraits. And that it's kind of like you said, I don't need that secondary trauma. Like, I'm walking around and I'm looking at these portraits and I'm like, this doesn't feel good to me. And then the only time I see someone that looks like me is in servitude. And I can walk right past that area. So then there's this other section. You walk past this one section, and then you go into the older section, the older, I guess that was the original museum.
Right.
And I'm telling you, I felt something when I passed that threshold and went in there. And it wasn't a good feeling. And I said, I will never come back in this space again. Because I just felt something. I'm not going to say, something spiritual or anything like that.
Yeah.
It just felt like I didn't belong there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll say this. As I was going along and checking out the exhibit and just kind of compiling my thoughts about it and just kind of paying attention, like I said, more people are coming in. The group I was with, I think we were the only African Americans. And I couldn't help, especially when we were by the area that looked like the coffin tomb thing. When I was in that area, I was sitting there thinking, like, okay, I think I'm about ready to go. I've seen everything. I think I'm about ready to go. So I'm in between the two rooms. So the room with the large body laying across, and then the other room that's going in the other direction that has the tombs on each side of it. So I could kind of see both sides. And I'm seeing all these folks just, checking out the exhibit, and some upset, some just kind of trying to look how it's put together. Some just like, and I'm like, what came to mind, and I knew it was time for me to go, was those picnic cards from back in the day.
Wow.
I'm like, what's the difference? What's the difference? That's what it started looking like to me. I'm like, huh. The same kind of, like, huh.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, what's this for? Who's this for? And I'm like, okay, no.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting that it's the same feelings that we're kind of, talking about in that sense.
Yeah.
And mine is the blatant, like, it's obvious we were not in these pictures for a reason. I'm going deep, when I look at these portraits, and like I said, when I crossed into the older part, there were more portraits like that over on the left side, and I was like, I'm never going over on that side again, but it's that feeling of like, looking at those pictures made me want to cry, because I was like, I know what we were doing when they were, dressed up in all of this bravado, and
right.
The women were in their finery, and all of these horse and buggies and all of this stuff. I'm like, I know where we were,
Yeah.
And I, like I said, so with him doing, kind of placing us in those perspectives and taking out the original, folks that were in it, is the thing that kind of drew me more to his artistry.
Yeah, same here. And I thought it was a beautiful concept, because like, we'll make something that wasn't really there, but even though it didn't happen in the past, that doesn't mean it can't be in the future. And so that's what's brilliant about the concept. I love concepts of stuff more so than I love the actual things. That's what movies, music, or art. I just like concepts. And so I think it's a brilliant concept. But to be honest, after we left that exhibit, we didn't even go to the other part of the gallery. We went downstairs. It was like, I was ready to go, to be honest. We went to the gift shop, got a few things, and we just headed out, because we mainly went for that exhibit. And like I said, I think if I would have known what I was walking into, I would have been better prepared for it. And like I said, it wasn't like I was in there falling apart or anything like that, but my mind definitely was running, and all these feelings and stuff. And like I said, it was just like the same kind of detail I would have for working on some art. It was being used in that situation, and it was just a lot to take in. All the detail, all the people that was there, who wasn't there, the people who were there, where were they, you know, the display of everything. Like I said, looked like a snap, like one of those postcards from a picnic. And it was just like, oh, and it was just a lot. It was a lot. No, and it just really just had me just thinking about how powerful art is, and how it's used. And like I said, it just made me wonder why too. And the exhibit is not wrong, you know, if that's what he or any artist want to do. Like I said, Kara Walker, she does the same kind of stuff, and it's on purpose. It's so funny because it's just so like, you're an artist, you can express yourself, do what you want, and it also, but you know what? Okay, as an artist, you can do whatever you want to, and as a person, I don't have to like it. How about that? That's that's the relationship.
So are you?
You can do what you want. You can just not do it with me. That's and that's of any relationship. Like, okay, they like drinking and you don't like drinking. You don't have to be around them drinking. If they like smoking and you don't like smoking, you don't have to be around each other. So people can do what they want, and it doesn't make it right or wrong. But the person who has to be in a vicinity of it, they can either like it or not like it, take it or leave it, digest it or not, be a part of it or not.
So for you, it's just this exhibit. It's not his work, like all, you know.
Like I said, I like this
funnier things.
Like I said, the stuff I saw earlier. I saw his earlier work. The reason why I knew about him because like folks like Russell Simmons and Nas was buying his artwork, and I'm like, who's this dude? And he was doing like this old school retro modern hip hop with the gold goblets and the crowns and stuff. Like, this is straight hip hop, you know. Having us in places that we, you know, we probably see ourselves in our own minds, but he put it to canvas and he made it to reality so everybody could share on that vision that we see of ourselves. He puts it in context. Like I said, I think he's brilliant, but you know, that don't mean that you necessarily rock with everything everybody does.
So even if it's from the perspective of it happened, he started working on this work during the pandemic and during, you know, obviously after George Floyd was murdered. I mean, I guess from an artist, you know, perspective, if you're working on something in that moment because it was so effective for several reasons, because it stopped the world, you know what I mean, for a few seconds, basically, you know, and then from the perspective of being, you know, an African American as well, if you start that work and then it's done, I mean, you can't really control when it's done, you know what I mean? So like, if you're feeling in that moment, like, I got to do something, you know.
Like I said, he is not wrong.
Right.
Never said he was wrong. Never said he wasn't talented. Very talented, and he's not wrong. I'm saying that exhibit wasn't for me.
Right. But I think that's, you know, that's what art is. It's, you know, it draws different feelings and emotions for different people. And it's good to hear that. It's good to hear that you know, your reaction to it was different than mine. You know, did I take it in as like they look like dead bodies on the floor? Yeah, I mean, I did.
That's what they look like.
Yeah, you know, I did feel something. You know what I mean? I did acknowledge. You know, especially since I didn't listen to the audio, I assumed that they were dead. You know, but then the details of like the flowers and stuff was, you know, kind of brings, you know, the bodies to life. And you know, even on the sculptures, there were like vines that were, you know, they weren't colorful, but they looked alive. So like, you know, you start thinking about that, like, what's the semblance of like these vines and stuff growing on these bodies? You know, are they, you know, at rest, or are they dead? You know, have they passed? So, you know, it's interesting because I think the first time I went, it was just, for me, just the scale of his artistry, and that's all I really kind of focused on, but then watched how other people were kind of taking it in, you know, as well.
Yeah, like I said, it was a journey. I saw stuff and I'm like, huh. And then I saw other stuff that kind of countered it, like the woman with the white flowers, her eyes being open. Oh, okay, so it's not a theme. Maybe if she's alive, then the rest are alive. And then it was just the, you know, the audience that was there, and it was just levels, and keep going different rooms, and it's stuff just kind of, it wasn't like instant. I walked in there and like, oh no, yeah, I was impressed. Like I said, with the size, the scale, the techniques and stuff like that. Even like I said, I didn't know he did sculpture, so even checking that out. So all that stuff. Oh, I was, you know, in awe. And as I went along with that awe came my other aha. But it wasn't
Did
like
you
an instant thing.
hear other people's perspectives when you were in there? Did you hear people talking about, besides the, the group that you were with?
To be honest, I wouldn't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't in that, because then if I heard something I didn't want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I don't go looking for stuff if I'm not ready to receive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you go into that room that they basically had for people to go into
to leave notes
and write Post-it notes, and
which I thought was very interesting and a cool concept. I think everybody in the group wrote something. I didn't, and the thing about it, when I talked to some of the folks in my group, they just thought it was just, it was powerful. And how would it not be? How would it not be? How would it not be breathtaking? How would it not be, in awe, of the skill and the concept and the, the size and the collection, like the choices that was put together was very well curated. So it was, like I said, it just wasn't for me. And like I said, and just the, the audience that was there at the time, and just the way everything's kind of came together for me was just like one of those kind of things. And sometimes you do have art or even food or music that have things that you like in it, but they just don't come together that hits you right. And it could be a hit for everybody, but you just don't like that song because it just doesn't hit you quite right. But it got the violins you like and got the vocalists that you like, but something about them drums that day or that arrangement just didn't line up. But to take away from the skill of everybody, no, people still like it, and that's great.
But I think that, from the way that you're, kind of expressing it, I think it did exactly what it was supposed to do, Jason. I think you were supposed to feel exactly the way you felt, because that's what it meant to you. You know what I mean? I don't even really think about the, the statement of like, it just wasn't for me. I think I get what you're saying. It wasn't for you because it didn't affect you in a way that was necessarily positive, but you did see it and it did affect you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
if I got hit by a car, it affect me. That don't mean it was a positive thing and I wanted more. I could eat a bad meal and get food poisoning and it affected me, but that doesn't mean I wanted to go through that. And it wasn't.
So how would you have protected yourself from that?
Okay, if I'd have known the theme of it, or if I would have saw 4 images, I would have got an idea what was up, and I'd be like, I'm good.
Interesting.
Even somebody like Picasso, somebody might like the Blue series or don't like the Blue series, and they won't go to that exhibit because they don't care for that series of work. They would go for something else. Mm-hmm. They still like Picasso.
So would you, next time he comes around with another exhibit, would you do what you just said? Like, I need to kind of...
Yeah, we'll check and see what kind of stuff was going to be on display. Because really what I thought was going to be on display is the other stuff I saw of his. Because it wasn't like I was going in blind not knowing who he was. I've been seeing his stuff. I had never seen that work. And so, like I said, when I started off, the biggest part of this with me was my assumption, my idea of what I thought I was walking into. Right. So I put that on me in the first place. Even when we started talking, I started off with saying, my expectations was off because I was thinking I was gonna, get Thriller and not the Blood on the Dance Floor album. Whoops.
Well, I think all of us thought that we went in there. I think all of us were thinking, kind of like you said, the work that he's done before. I don't know. I guess it was just, I don't know. I just feel like he worked on it around the time that stuff happened, and then it came out around this time. It was completed this time, and his mission was complete for him. He's actually done a couple of like artist talks, I think since like May, talking about different themes and stuff like that, subject matter and stuff. I don't know how they go. I don't know if it's like the audience is able to kind of communicate with him, back and ask those kind of questions. I don't know.
So answer me this. Say, okay, not talking about him. Is there any kind of art or artist or a series of art that somebody did that you don't care for?
I mean, I'd have to really think about it. I can't really think of anybody. I mean, I can't really think of anybody.
Right, in particular?
Yeah.
And like, that's with art. Like some stuff you like or you don't like. Like, for example, do you listen to Michelle Indegecello?
I have.
Are you familiar with her albums at all?
Not like you are.
Okay. All right. She has an album called Bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those kind of albums everybody's like, what is going on? Because she's kind of known for having more like a funk kind of thing kind of going with her, you know, with her bass and all that kind of stuff. And so this album is a more melancholy, kind of a sad album, but very powerful. And I like stuff like that. I like some of the stuff like that, you know, because sometimes it can be very relatable, but a lot of people don't like it because it's heavy. And it's one of those kind of albums that years later, people were starting to love. You know, they just kind of came across it later on, but at the time they wasn't ready for it, and they came back to it later, to the point where she started doing like shows where she just did the whole Bitter album.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of one of those things, but people who loved her did not like that album, and it was like it was a flop for her in a way. But later on it came back, and you know, kind of when everything kind of settled, you know, that's what people wanted from her. And so sometimes you be timing and different things, and it, you know, but at the time you couldn't convince nobody to like that album because it just wasn't for, you know, wasn't their thing. Like Signs of the Times with Prince,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like that double album. What's all Starfish and Coffee? What's all that? You know, they wanted Purple Rain, right? You know, and that's one of his best albums, you know, that people love and adore. But yeah, but like I said, not taking anything from the.
You know what? I just want to again say thank you, you know, in that sense of giving a different perspective of it, because it is something to consider in the sense of how I guess even as artists, you know, we're stuck on the like, we don't make art for people, we make it for ourselves. You know what I mean? If we were to go by what everybody else thinks, then we'll never make art, right? So
yeah, gotta have that attitude.
Yeah. So, you know, it's from that point of being an artist, it is good to hear the good and the, you know, and I wouldn't say good or bad, but just how people actually experience art. And that's how you experienced it. You know what I mean? Whereas like, I consider myself an active listener, it's my superpower. So when you started talking, I was surprised by it, but then I was like, wow, you know, like I didn't even really think of it that way. When I go back the third time, I'll probably call you and be like, I get it. Like I get, you know, like I get how you might have felt standing by the tomb, you know, standing by this coffin or you know, watching these, looking at the things on the floor.
So question, okay, I know what I said or how I feel about it. So what do you take it from what I'm saying? I'm kind of curious.
No, I'm taking exactly what you said, that you had a different perspective of it, and it wasn't for you because it hit you pretty deep. It wasn't just powerful. Yes, it wasn't, and it that word that you just used is the key, because you can say that word and I can say the same word and it means two different things, right? And I'm talking about the word powerful.
Yeah.
I could have started off this whole thing saying, oh, it was really powerful, and you could have said that too. Yeah. But we have two different ideals of it. So that's what I'm hearing, and that's what I got from what you were saying to me.
So did you see it as a display of tragedy at all? Or how'd you see it?
It had to be tragic if you are especially an African American person.
Or just a human.
You know, yes. It had to be tragic without any real explanations of if these folks were asleep or if they were dead. You know what I mean? And then there were actually some sculptures where it was pure grief. You know, people kneeling, you know, like they were crying, and you know, one of them was like two people together, I think, kind of like they were grieving. Either one had passed, another one was grieving over them. I forgot exactly which portrait it was. Yeah. But those statues looked like death. They didn't look like they had any life in them, you know. And those are the ones that you spend a lot of time on because it was dark. Mm-hmm. So you had to really study them. Whereas the paintings were bright and they were sunny, and you were like, okay, they might be alive. You just kind of nice flowers, this good technique, and you kind of move on to the next one. But you spend more time looking at the sculptures because you're studying them. Yeah. And you might be looking for some life in them as you're studying them. Because just because of them being gray or tonnage wise, the feeling of it being dark and gray and heavy, you just assume that those folks are dead. And then you're just looking for a sign of life. I probably looked at the faces more than I did anything else. You know what I mean? Like maybe if somebody else came in and they were like I like hip hop, but it might be somebody that really loves hip hop. They might have been like, oh, look at the clothes, like look at the jeans. He's got like the pants kind of down below the waist, kind of hanging like we do sometimes. Look at, the brand names and stuff like that. I think I even looked at like the hands and the nails, and I think one of the coffins, if you will, the guy had something in his hands, and I remembered it at that time. But I looked at the faces. I was like, are the eyes open? Are they closed? Like, are they alive? And I think that was purposeful, to have you kind of guessing in that sense. And I think them being placed on the floor was purposeful, because it basically brought up those feelings that you have of seeing bodies kind of cascaded on the ground. When we look at reports and stuff like that, or the news, that's common for us as African Americans. And it's beyond the media. It's stuff that some of us have grown up with. And what it can invoke is secondary trauma, or it can invoke trauma, period. Or it can bring up trauma.
Because I liken it to like the same way I don't watch silliness like Tyler Perry stuff. Like people may not have issue with it. I don't like it.
Right.
And we talked about Spike Lee before. Some people can have a problem with Spike Lee's work. They might think it's too heavy for them, but I like it. So, and that's part of, like I said, it's part of the art too. So for sure, I know that that's the relationship of art, is the person viewing it and the person, or the art itself, because really after somebody releases it, it is what it is. And then the other side is what that art is versus how the person takes it. And that's either good, bad, or indifferent. So that's like somebody listens to this record and they'd be like, oh, I don't like what Jason said. It's my art I put out there, and people are going to take it good, bad, or indifferent.
If you were by yourself and not with your friends, would you have left earlier?
Would I have left earlier, or would I have completed the exhibit?
Well, earlier you said if you saw 4 images that were pretty much consistent in the sense of what you were saying, you know what I mean? Like,
I would have kept going. I'm just saying, as far as like when I saw the 4, I'm like, so I'm assuming Obama's not going to be in here. I'm assuming that piece ain't gonna be up in there. So it was like that. So I saw quickly that it wasn't. Oh, this is a different kind of, So I am not saying that I was there and just pissed off and all this other kind of stuff. I'm just saying it was just, like I said, if I knew it was just gonna be a lot of, laid out bodies on display. That's like certain things I don't even like watch. Like, you know what? It's almost like our conversation we had about the slave narrative movies, like that. To me, it's on the same as that, and my feelings about those kind of movies. And obviously people love them because they get awards, they make them every other year, they get budgets to get made. Can't have no black person flying to the moon, but they sure could be enslaved. They could still be they got that worked out, they got that plot worked out. So one was enough, and people got their different interpretations and stuff like that. But just to kind of keep going back to that, it's just like, no, not for me. And now, do I think they're wrong for making those movies? They're not wrong for making the movies. They want to make it, but I'm not funding it, and I'm not going to support it by going to it. But good for them. Me seeing them and supporting it is not stopping that movie from being made, right? But if there's enough people who don't care for it and not supporting it, then that'll move it. But otherwise,
I'm not sure that you're alone in your thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Are there kind of some boards out there or something that people might have a different, kind of spin on this exhibit? Maybe, or maybe people are like, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want anybody to know that I don't particularly care for it.
I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot of that. But even so, it's not wrong for him to have that exhibit there. I think that's great that he has an exhibit there. He's a black artist, modern times, getting his just dues while he's alive. Get it, man. So, like I said, it's not wrong for him to have that exhibit there. It is not wrong. It was
So
sitting
would
there before I went to go see it, and it's sitting there now that I'm gone. It's still there. Them dead bodies still laying on the floor and on the walls. They'll be there
I was
tomorrow too.
I was gonna ask you if you would recommend anybody going to it, but I don't know. I'll let you.
I think if you're into that kind of stuff, then yeah, if you know, same people who go to like watching slave narrative movies, I think it'd be great. I think I'm just playing, kind of not, but I think if you like his work and you know what his work is about, I think because he's not the only person who did stuff about about Black folks dying and passing. Like I said, I wouldn't see that with anybody, no matter how good the artwork was or whatever, unless it was some kind of perspective that would be an entryway for me. That's basically what it is. It's like taste. Like people like red wine or white wine. It's not like it's bad or not. It's just not the taste. So I think it just like it would be like a Spike Lee movie. Like, would you recommend a Spike Lee to? It depends on if you like those kind of movies or not. It depends on what you're into. If you want some hard truths that might be hard for you, and it might not be in a perspective that you normally see, if you like Spike Lee movies, you might like this exhibit.
So that's if you were going to, if someone were to ask.
It depends on who they were. Like if you asked me, I would kind of give you a heads up on what it was, and I'll be like, you probably would dig it because you like art for art's sake. And the reason why I went to, in a way, was kind of like I said, the whole thing was that I thought it was going to be a certain kind of thing, and the whole thing and the people I took with me was for that kind of thing. So it's almost like taking my kids to go see something, and this is crazy. I'm thinking it's going to be like a PG cartoon, and it's some nudity and sex and stuff going on, and I'm like, ooh. Mm-hmm. I didn't mean to walk into that. I wasn't quite ready for that yet. Like that. Now, if I was going with my boys who's down for that, then, oh yeah, we'll go see stuff get blown up and all that kind of stuff, whatever. Depending on your audience or who you got going with you, then you would caution it differently. You would, and like I said, it didn't help that I had kids with me there. I don't think that kind of helped either. Like I said, it just made, like the kids being there with me made me kind of like, really check what was up. You know how if you walking by yourself and you're in a, kind of familiar place, but might be kind of sketchy, but kind of familiar, you're kind of light with it, right? But if you got a loved one with you or family with you, you're going to be kind of extra, right? You're going to be extra, like if it was you walking through it, it'd be fine. But the fact you got other people you got to be concerned about or you're looking out for, it'd be different.
Yeah.
And so to me, it'd be like the same thing. Like, I know Malay ain't ready for some of those Spike Lee movies. And I love Spike Lee, but when I said Malay watch certain Spike Lee movies, no, she ain't ready for it yet. Mm-hmm. And some stuff she might need to come to figure out and see for herself, and then come back and see how Spike Lee explains it.
Right.
But I wouldn't necessarily give her that ride if she didn't need it.
Gotcha.
For some of it. But was it a powerful, well-curated, beautiful and bright exhibit? Yes. Is he a dope artist? Yes. Does he have good vision and concepts? Yes. Was it a heavy show? Yes. Was it for me? No. But I think it was cool. It was cool. But like I said, but it doesn't make it bad. I mean, people shouldn't go see it. People should definitely, if you like art, that's like I see a whole bunch of crazy movies because I just like movies. And so I'm kind of knowing that what I'm going into. And when I invite a friend to go, like when I invite you to go see The Blackening, I wouldn't just ask anybody to go see that. I consider who you were or in our relationship. All that stuff was a factor before I would think to even ask you to go see something like that. If I thought you was easily offended or I thought that you felt ways about certain kind of things or didn't, then I would like, I would even kind of ask with like, what about this? Or how do you feel about, and the less I wouldn't know for sure, the more questions I would ask. But if I knew like, oh, she'll just go check out something cool because she just, then I would just kind of leave it vague and like, hey, you down? And you'll be like, yeah or no. Mm-hmm. All right. Like I took 5 people with me. so it wasn't like I invited 5 people. I took 5 people with me, just not knowing exactly what it, assuming it was going to be Obama. So that was all.
I'm not going to recommend any more museum trips for you again.
Like I said, I was planning on going. I forgot that it was still there. And I'm glad you reminded me because I wanted to see it before it left. I see a lot of art. I like a lot of art and stuff like that. I'm trying to think. Like I said, only person I could think of is that Kara Walker chick that does the silhouettes of like, the slave master pooping out the kid and all that kind of stuff. Like, some of that stuff just like, and that's for her to express, and she's successful for doing it and all this other kinds. To each his own. Even though I don't like hers, it's not bad. It's not bad. But a lot of people say stuff that they don't like? No, a lot of people don't. They'll just not say anything at all. But since we're talking about it, then I'm talking. But would I be like standing in front of the museum talking about, hey, don't go in there? Hey, don't go in there. There's dead bodies everywhere. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. Like me as a person, as an artist, just as a person who like art, why, no, everybody, I don't hate him or even the art. The art was beautifully done. My reaction to it, I guess for the record, I'm not dogging it. And it's not like a bad exhibit. Like I said, it's a powerful exhibit. And I think a lot of people who were there got a lot from it. But it's almost too, like I said, I kind of know what that looks like. I know what that looks like. And I personally don't need art or somebody's work or a movie or a song about that. I'm not the audience because I already know that. I already respect it. I already know the weight and gravity of it. I know what it means. I know the connections to it and stuff like that. So I don't need the, please see what's happening here, help here, or hurt here, pain here. Like I wouldn't need to see necessarily something saying like, I don't wait for something to tell me that I'm a good father. I don't need to prove to people that I'm a good father. I know I'm a good father. So certain things that I already know to be true, sometimes I don't necessarily gravitate to things that I kind of know the truth of, or I already feel like that's important to me, almost like the preaching to the choir kind of thing. Like I don't I already know that. And for some, that might be their gateway to finally see Black folks that's in that predicament.
I mean, so why don't we talk about that perspective? I mean, did that bother you kind of as well? Like you said, who is this for? Do you think that other folks got more out of it, or you think it was meant for them?
I'm assuming it's meant for everybody since it's in a public place. I think what people get from it will vary depending on who they are and why they went there. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Because like a bullfight. You think people are rooting for the matador to outsmart that bull, but sometimes people are watching so they can see that bull kill that matador. They both get a show though. One, you sound like a jerk for saying who you're rooting for, but nobody would know because everybody's cheering. So you can't really tell who's cheering for what and for who.
That's interesting. I think I probably paid more attention to if people were really paying attention to what they were seeing, or if they were just walking through, just talking, you know what I mean? And there were a couple of folks doing that, just like loudly, just kind of communicating with each other, and it had nothing to do with the exhibit. So I guess from my perspective, I was thinking, wow, it's not really penetrating them as much as penetrated me, so I pay more attention to that kind of stuff. Not spying like, ooh, are they,
of course not.
Don't look like me reacting the way that I want them to,
Yeah.
Are they looking sad? Are they feeling some kind of emotion or something like that? And I probably made a glimpse at that, and what might have pulled my attention more was seeing folks just walk through it, like and they were done. You know what I mean? So like that was effective.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't really pay attention to what they were necessarily saying or doing and stuff. Like I said, 'cause you had a little bit of everybody. You had some people just kind of stand there with their, hands across their mouth and just kind of standing looking. You had people just kind of walking by. So all that stuff, it's kind of like I don't know. I kind of don't give too much to that, only because I think of it like how people grieve. Just because somebody's not falling apart when the thing happens doesn't mean that they don't care.
Right.
Some of the closest people to me who has passed, my reaction was almost null during that time, and then years later, either something or somebody not connected to them who passed away that I didn't even know, I guess was like a totem or a representation of them to me. And so I got that cry 5 years later. And one was like a silly movie about somebody dealing with loss, and a comedy movie that had, and it was just like, oh, so that cry was for this other person. And that was, years later as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so all reactions is right, I guess, depending on who you are. And I try not to put on people expectations of their reaction, because you just don't know or can tell what it really is. I know how it could be looking like, and sometimes people, they'll straight up just say it, and you don't have to even guess.
Yeah.
They just straight up said it, or you know them well enough to know what's up. So it doesn't take too much to figure it out. But
I mean, that's a good thought, because like I said, I was only more I really just more acknowledged when people walk through it and we're talking
mhm.
and not stopping and looking. But then again, that's another sign of like uncomfortable, being uncomfortable too. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Maybe they walked in, this is the third room too. So it's just like
yeah,
they had already been through two
because
other rooms. So maybe for them it was like I wasn't with them when they walked in. They might have been awestruck and then just kind of like, oh, it's the same, throughout every room. So I
yeah,
get it.
because
Things. So.
some hit me different than others. Some stuff was just like, huh, and some of the stuff was like, and some of the stuff was like, ah, because it's just like so grand, and some of the stuff was like,
Hmm.
oh, like me walking around a statue, like, and like I walked around it, and his face is like down in the ground, so you never could really make eye contact, right? And so it's just
Hmm.
like kind of confusion trying to work out what is actually, the size is massive for one, and then you're just trying to work around and see what's exactly there, and then you see that the face is missing, and even that was just kind of like a thing, like, oh, so you can't console, you can't look into the eyes, you can't none of that, and like, okay, that's interesting. Like I said, I wouldn't necessarily hate watching it, but some of the stuff just like, oh, he's in a ravine, and even though it's lit well and it's brightly lit, he definitely looks like he's dead. But then also, like you said, you got the foliage that's really bright and pretty, and you got like his clothes is not dirty or ripped up or something, so it's not like, but that's almost like a dead man in the desert in the middle of nowhere, but it's beautiful. So some of the stuff I kind of like, okay, like with the tomb slash coffin kind of like things, those I didn't spend much time on. It's a bit much for me. Walked past and went to other rooms. So it just depended on how the thing kind of, because even though the horse one with the guy laying across it was a lot and it was huge and stuff, I think some of it was just like, as tragic as the imagery of it was, I was more caught up on the size of it and just the fact that it existed. Like, wow,
Hmm.
more so. And so some of my feelings about some of the stuff too kind of hit me later on, because sometimes you just be on stuff, like you don't always understand like how you almost died in that car accident, during the time. At the time you just surviving, right? You just trying to get out of the situation to be okay, and then you lose it after you're safe, because now you don't have to get yourself to a safe place, right? You can just marinate on what happened. Oh, that person did this and did that, So you got some people who fall apart in the moment, and you got some people who fall apart after, when they're in a safe place, after they got themselves out of the situation. So
Hmm.
everybody's kind of different as far as like processing and stuff. So my thoughts and stuff just kind of went as I went along. Like I said, it just was in steps and stuff. One thing makes you think about something else, and one thing, and then like the guard that was there, he was African American, but everybody else in there was pretty much just white, except for my group. And it's just like, huh. So it's like, and then it's like, oh, it's us and the paintings and the statues here that are brown people, and then the rest is just kind of like, huh. And like, how does that look?
One of the guards, the one that I was talking to, was saying not enough people of African American descent knew that the museum was free on certain days. Like they didn't even have to pay. I think Google was like sponsoring it or something, maybe once or twice a month on certain days. That was interesting that she worked there and she kept seeing that there weren't enough brown and black people coming to this exhibit, and
But
felt like other folks were more knowledgeable about that.
But honestly, like, would that be the thing you want them to come to? Do you think folks would go to that though? Who would want to go to that?
Well, I mean, if you're asking the guard that.
Yeah, on their side, they're the one of service, and we have these opportunities. But then it's also, it got to match with the want. Like, I might want to sell you something, but that doesn't mean that they want what I'm selling. You know what I mean? It's like, I made another slave movie for you. It's free on Tuesday. I'm good. Not saying that's what that is, but I'm just saying it might, just because there's offering or whatever. Like I said, they're on one side of it because of course they probably just want more brown people there in general, not just for that exhibit, but just in general, right? And so I don't know. Okay, if it's a different exhibit of his work that was there, and they'd be like, the guy whose work is bought by Nas and bought by Jay-Z and this. One commercial, everybody be going there to see what kind of stuff Jay-Z got in his house. I could be next to that artist, is maybe even get a poster. So being like, it's a thing on it about this museum that folks don't hardly go to anyway. Is going to come on a certain day to go see this exhibit with these and this narrative this time. And I like the stuff and didn't even know that it was even going on. I came across it the first time on a fluke. And like I said, you reminded me that it was still there so I could go see it. Because when I thought about it, when you said it, I think like, man, did I miss it? And you're like, no, it's still there until like October or something like that. So, it's, but that's not just with the gallery. That's with a lot of things, especially services and stuff. Like it might be services for clothes or food or giving away this and this and that. And it's always a disconnect of getting the information to the people who's going to want it. That's always, that's commerce. That's everything. That's like, how do you let the people know what you got? And not just anybody, but the people that wants it or be to benefit for them, like if it's a school, if there's little kids, like sometimes like, the kids go on field trips and stuff and I, go to museums and stuff and I volunteer and help out and stuff. Right. I wouldn't think that'd be good for like elementary school kids to go necessarily see. To me, some might get something out of it, and be fine. But I don't know. I guess it would be the angle of what they were saying the exhibit was about, or whatever, or whatever. But that could be with any kind of thing. That's almost like Holocaust Museum or something like that, right? Like, would you take elementary school? Like, they need to know the history. I understand, but then also it'd be a certain age too, I would think. So it just depends on a whole bunch of factors. But and not comparing it to that, but I'm just saying it could be heavy narrative things, or it could be something like sexual or something. I would still have the same concern to be like, hey, what's this saying? Because really, it could be saying whatever it wants to say, but I gotta have some kind of interpretation to what I'm gonna have to deal with when the audience I'm bringing in is going to be viewing it that I'm responsible for.
So if you were recommending it to someone, then you would use those words, that statement, that it's heavy narrative.
Yeah, like with anything you would go to, you would kind of read what's on the package, like what's in it, right? So it would be, and like I said, usually stuff happens. Usually people get surprised when, like I said, they don't read the label or the package, they don't know what's going on with it. Like I said, to me, it's the equivalent to me thinking I'm taking my kids to a certain kind of movie and it turns into something else. And it doesn't make it a bad movie, it just wasn't necessarily appropriate for them.
Yeah.
Just like you would take like you would have a date night at a crazy movie. You would kind of you try to make sure it fit the situation. That's all. But it doesn't make it bad. But it's kind of like a movie you probably would enjoy. You'd be feeling awkward about because of the audience there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Same movie. Just like we saw The Blackening. What was my main thing? I didn't want certain people sitting next to me while I'm watching it because I don't want them laughing. All a certain audience would be no big deal. But if it's like, I'm only one in there and they're making jokes and everybody laughing at it, then I'm kind of like, Same movie, right? I liked it when I was watching it with folks, and it was kind of rough for me when it wasn't folks with me.
Mm-hmm.
So all those stuff are factors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Art and stuff changed by the lighting and the placement of the sun. Looks ominous when the sun's hitting the statue at a certain time of day, and it's beautiful and well lit and got the golden light at a certain time and it's just glowing. So all same statue, sun in different location makes all the difference on the interpretation of the piece.
Gotcha. Why are you laughing? I'm gonna equate this I'm gonna equate this similarly to what you said. Like, I walked into this thinking it was gonna be different. Meaning, I thought you were going to be like, it was awesome. You know what I mean? Just from that perspective.
It
And you're not
was.
saying it wasn't awesome.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. And like I said, it was powerful. It was beautiful. Like I said as well, it was.
Yeah.
It was. But like I said, like I said, I'm also the type of person who don't like slave movies. I'm also that person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't watch those movies. I kind of take it akin to that. And like I said, it's not wrong for people who like sinister. It's not. Like I said, it's just taste. People have been going to see that showing. And it's been there for a while now. So long that I thought it was gone, and you told me it was still there. So it's been there for a long time, and a lot of people saw it, and a lot of people get a lot from it. And like I said, who knows? It might be like I said, it might be for some people the first time. I don't know who knows what they think of it exactly, but a lot of people, maybe that's only when they could see a black body like that. Maybe that would have to be the dressing of it, to see it. I guess I don't even like seeing that kind of stuff on the news.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate how they don't blur us. They'll show us like that. You know what I mean? Like, people who did it, they want to show their name, and they're public figures, but the perp/victim, you know everything about them, baby pictures and everything, and don't even blur it. So, but all honesty, I think it's brilliant and it's very powerful. Like I said, and at the same time, not for me, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't. How can something like that not touch people?
Yeah.
How could it not? But I didn't want to be touched, and they didn't ask permission.
I was gonna say it touched you, not in a great way, but it still touched you. You know what I mean? It did its job. You're touched.
If that's what they were going for, then yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the thing is, maybe people would be thinking like the other stuff with the bling and all that kind of stuff, like us on top kind of thing. Maybe they think that kind of work is superficial or not believable.
Mm.
And I think that's wrong for them to possibly think that way about that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I think it would be powerful, and I think it would be truth to power, and I think it would be aspirational and all those things. But maybe they think that's frivolous, and they need to see us in certain kind of ways for people to see us.
Yeah, I think, that's why I was saying I was feeling affected by people just kind of, walking by and talking about the grocery list, you know what I mean? And not really taking it in. But again, from what you were saying, people view things from different perspectives. It's equivalent to yours, you know what I mean? There's just different perspectives of how you look at art and how you consume it. So
yeah, and you just can't make people kind of care, and you just never know. It's like people sitting there talking through a good movie, and it's like, why'd you pay to come in here if all you want to do is be on your phone?
Yeah,
it's interesting. People, we're something, boy. We're something. And so, like I said, I'm not dogging the exhibit. Do I think other people probably feel that way? Probably so. And probably what they normally say, they probably and normally, like I said, if we wasn't having this conversation, this would be kind of more like a conversation I would have with you, just private, us talking about something. Mm-hmm. Versus me just being like, because I could have said something crazy on Instagram or Facebook or something. I didn't even mention it. It's like,
mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it wasn't like, out to get it or anything like that. But I think if you're a person who like his art or want to see some powerful art that's like that, then that's for sure, because it has a lot to say.
Yeah.
All right, I think we touched on a lot of stuff. That's a beautiful way to conclude the conversation. I don't know, any last words about the exhibit?
I'm glad that you went. I'm not going to say I'm sorry that it didn't turn out the way that we thought it would, or specifically you. I'm just very happy that you had the opportunity to go, because as a friend, I know now, we talked about the slave narratives, but like, it's a different concept. You know what I mean? It goes
Yeah.
deeper than that. Like it can splinter off into different kind of genres is what I'm learning from you now.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm not blaming you. For sure, I'm not blaming you. And for sure, and like I said, it wasn't, at least I don't think it was necessarily traumatized, but like I said, it was a trip. It definitely was a trip.
Like when you said knowing you, I know what to ask, or when you talked
Yeah.
about the movie, it's the same thing for me now because I just think Jason's an artist. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
And
now I understand that a little bit more. So
in my artist side, like I said, I think it was beautiful. The beautiful part, like, hey, that's almost like a, like I said, a bad movie could be badly written, but it's beautifully directed, and I can respect it on both ends. Be like, yeah, that movie sucked, but that direction was really good. Or Denzel saved that movie. That movie was crap, but guess what? The best part was Denzel. That's just kind of how that goes. But like I said, I'm glad I went. That was fine. Like I said, it was just, I was just expecting something else. And really, like I said, if I would have looked into it more, because I like the artist, if I would have looked into it more, I would have saw like this is a series of blah 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 or whatever. Just like if it was like a series of, I like abstract, but say it's about abstract, then I'd be like, oh, I'm not really into abstract. I don't want to see that. Then but I wanted to see the guy's work. Like I said, he's a brilliant artist. And it's one of those kind of ones that you like, hey, when I was younger, I wasn't really into art like that. I didn't grow up in art like that. I did art because I enjoyed art. I had a mother that was kind of like, she didn't trip off of it. I could be like, I'm at school and the teachers like my art or the kids like my art. And she'll be like, hey, you draw all the time, you paint all the time, you should be good. So I never had no errors or anything about it. I just kind of did it and did it the way I wanted to do it. Nobody tell me that, what was wrong or right. I just kind of did what I felt. And I've always been like that. And so I think it kind of made me open as far as art, but still that don't mean that I necessarily like all of it or agree with all of it, but I do respect it. And I think that all artists should be able to express themselves the way they want to. And like I said, how people take it or feel about it has nothing to do with them. Their job is to express what they digested from their life and put out and their perspective to show that they were here and they had something to say about it. And I think even if you're not an artist or anything like that, you have to find out your way to put your mark on the part of, your time here, find out a way how to put your mark and be like, hey, this is my perspective on how I saw this, or this is what that meant to me. And for a lot of us, it's our children. But if we have like some other kind of talents or something that we do where we could do it in a different kind of way, in some kind of way, archive it and have it to share for others outside of yourself, be it art or even like a podcast or whatever, to kind of show your thoughts and perspective that could be shared with others, then you should definitely do that. You should definitely do that, regardless if somebody like it or not, regardless if somebody understand it or not. It's more or less your job to have it and to put it out there, and it's going to be what it's going to be, and who it's for will hopefully find it. Yeah. So, but like I said, I'm not regretting that I saw it at all. But like I said, I wouldn't have known if I liked it or not if I wouldn't have went. So it's just one of those kind of things. Like I said, it just wasn't the narrative that I normally go check out. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't a brilliant exhibition. And like I said, I'm glad for anybody. Like Issa Rae said, like, I bet on anything that's black. It's a hard space to be a part of, and so when we are in places like that and we do have a chance to share our perspectives and our thoughts on things like that, even with you being where you are, doing what you're doing, all those things are very important to have out there, because for sure, if you're not saying it, somebody else is going to be doing a take on their interpretation of what we or you be wanting to say or express. So if it could come from the person who actually lived it or who is living it, then that's you can't beat that. You can't beat that. So we got to make sure we don't leave it up into interpretation, and make sure we clearly express our feelings and who we are as a people, because we don't want nobody to make it up for us.
So if you thought that artists have like a duty or one obligation, what would you think it would be?
I guess express their truth, but that doesn't mean everybody's gonna like it or agree with it. But they express their truth, because really it's such a giving thing. Expression in art, any kind of art, it's such a giving thing, but it's such a selfish thing too. And I think that the more selfish it is, almost the more powerful it could be. Because really, if it's that personal to you, it'll get all the details, it'll get all the attention, it'll give all the thought, it'll give all the energy towards it. And even though you'd be thinking like, this is finite thing that meant something to me, or I saw it a certain kind of way, and you might think it's the smallest thing and nobody would care, and it could just be the answer for so many people that just couldn't whittle it down that small to make it into a key to get through that door. They just didn't have the tools to get there. And your song, your poem, your art, your movie opened that door. So many people, art and music and stuff, open doors for me just to kind of help me get through that. Just summed it up like, I didn't think of it that way. I need to hear that, you know? Or that's just crazy and I'm the exact opposite. It shot me the other way because it was just too, but you kind of need it all. You kind of need it all. So it's interesting. But
I would have I think if there was a duty or obligation, it would be to be effective. This was a heavy narrative, wasn't it?
Yeah, you traumatized me with that death exhibition.
See, in the end, you see what you said?
I haven't seen that many dead black people since the 10 o'clock news.
Right. Yesterday, right? Exactly. Wow.
I hope people spend as much time they do watching that exhibit, watching these actual people going through this stuff, because this is for real. No joking. This is for real.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the luxury of being a beautiful picture or a beautiful interpretation. It doesn't have that luxury.
Yeah. I guess it does make it easier to digest.
Yeah, unless you know what it's inspired by and you know what it really is, then you don't see the prettiness necessarily of it. You see the truth of it, you know. And that's the part that bites you. It's like, and rose-colored glasses don't work for everybody if you already know what's up. It's still hard. It's still just as bloody. It's still just as ugly. It's still just as violent and broken, even with the glasses on.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. So this is Jay and Sebrenia discussing the Kehinde Wiley exhibit at the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco. Honestly, we both agree it was a powerful exhibition. So until next time, peace.
Peace. And I think that it's funny that you brought up music, because I meant to bring it up a little earlier. You know, you need funding and stuff like that to create like these art pieces and documentaries and stuff like that. But it feels like music is the quickest thing that you could do to kind of speak against things that are kind of occurring. You know, when you think of Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddamn.
Can't you see it? I know you can feel it. It's all in the air. I can't stand this pressure much longer. Somebody say a prayer. Alabama's got me so upset, and Tennessee's made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi gone there. Hound dogs on my trail. School children sitting in jail. Black cat crossed my path. I think every day's gonna be my last. Lord, have mercy on this land of mine. We all gonna get it in due time. I don't belong here, I don't belong there. I've even stopped believing in prayer.
You know, she saw something, she wrote it, and she was like, this is me, you know. Same thing with Billie Holiday and those folks that, kind of some of these kind of protest songs. And I'm waiting for somebody to do that, Jason. I'm waiting for somebody to write a song about Florida or whatever. It's not just isolated to Florida, it's happening like everywhere else. But I feel like, I'm waiting for someone to say, okay, someone that's got, some money, somebody that's got some, like has that clout, if you will, that can say it's time somebody just make that happen.
But that doesn't always come from the folks who would have that. Because even the people you mentioned, they had to do it from a different country to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Put it like this: if it was like say somebody who's big and famous here, and they sang or did a song about it, the truth is that might not even be their reality in a way. You know what I mean? It would be somebody that would be on the ground, like somebody probably has that song or have that movie or whatever, but they don't really have any way to get it out to everybody. Or maybe it's something that genre of music we don't listen to, and so we would never hear it. So as long as there's an artist breathing somewhere, not necessarily everybody being tuned enough or skilled enough to pull it off, but I believe all that stuff, we say something about everything. And it's just so much noise and so many blockades and stuff like that. But it's always somebody somewhere, speaking to situations and stuff. And it's just like, it's just turned to a thing now where I think we'd have to do more work on the side of finding as much as they do of pushing. We have to meet halfway, or if not more so, because before I think that the power wasn't seen in it, so they let more stuff slide. And I think nowadays there's stuff you can't even say on YouTube, even as free as that's supposed to be. Certain words you can't even say, or topics you can't talk without being dinged, or even being on Facebook and stuff. Just like if it's something that they don't want on there, that you could post it to hundreds of people that you are friends with, and they won't post it. So there's more blocking than there is people doing stuff. There's more walls being built than there is expression trying to get out.
Yeah. I mean, you do have your Childish Gambino, who said, did the "This Is America."
Grandma told me, get your money, 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 get your money.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. Look how I'm geeking now. I'm so fitted. I'm on Gucci. I'm so pretty. I'm gonna get it. Watch me move.
Yeah.
That song. That was pretty good.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's like more stuff like that. But, he happened to be the right person at the right time who took a chance to do something like that. Most people ain't going to mess up their livelihood to get out of a song saying something that everybody kind of knows already.
Right.
Even as much as we appreciate and need that, like that song that means so much to me. Like that, how certain people do certain things to give them credit for the rest of their life. That's it for, if anybody question, because, he's one of the ones that people question their blackness and all this other kind of mess. Isn't it amazing the people that be talking that mess to be doing some brilliant stuff, like Jordan Peele questioning his blackness, and he do something like
sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
Mine is a terrible thing to waste.
No.
he explains, he encapsulates the sunken place. We knew about the sunken place. We never had a word for that. We knew the feeling. We know the vibe. We know when somebody else is in it. We can tell when we in it. And the guy that, is disconnected and his wife is this and this and this and this, and he sums it up. Gave us that treasure that put certain people in their place and acknowledge, because nobody want to acknowledge what's being done to us. Everybody want to be like, I didn't do it. What are you talking about? And he did it all in one swoop. And that's who delivered it. Not Spike Lee, not whoever, Jordan Peele, Childish Gambino, not Jay-Z. Childish Gambino did This Is America? Not Jigga? So what's the lesson in that?
That is courage and bravery, like you said, and at the levels that they're on, you would think, like you said, people who don't have a lot to lose on that level. Be like, yeah, but they're heroes in that sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or even the ones you don't think they have it in them.
Mm-hmm.
Those two I mentioned, I wouldn't think they'd be having some of the quote unquote blackest song and blackest movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, huh? One swoop? Everybody's just like, oh, okay. We're gonna leave them alone.
Right.
We'll never bring that up again. Sorry, sir.
Right.
Crazy. That's crazy. We just gotta be open because we're all together. We're all we got so much unlearning. But it'll happen. And the beautiful thing is when it all at the same time. And that's when it's really gonna count. Yeah. I think we're just passing each other in the night, going for air at different times. But one day we'll all go up for air at the same time, and then that's going to be a beautiful day.
Someday we'll all be free.
There you go.
Yeah. On that note.
So then I'll ask you that question. I think we talked about a little bit earlier about Nina Simone's statement. Nina Simone said, an artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. I think that is true of painters, sculptors, poets, and musicians. So he might connect to that as reflecting the times because of the reason why, he came up with that particular exhibit, or those thoughts or the creativity that came to him during that time of the pandemic and George Floyd. So how do you feel about that in general, that statement?
I think great artists do that, because I think a lot of artists have a hard time or avoid now, today, and sometimes it's hard because sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to have a perspective when you're in the middle of like the ocean. You gotta get to shore to look back of the journey of it, what it really meant, to see it from a different perspective. A lot of times in the middle of something, you really don't have nothing to do but to try to survive it, so you can have, so you have a story to tell after you survive the situation. So I think great art, because you always have stuff that's not related to anything, like portraits, or you could have plants or landscapes and stuff like that, or abstract. That could be anything, anytime, anywhere, but to find a way to express something that's currently going on. And sometimes it's not the thing that everybody sees, and sometimes it's stuff that people don't see, but it's personal to you. But then when you put it out there, you find out it's personal to a lot of people, and they didn't have those words to say it that way. And so it's said in a song, or said in a movie, or it's said in some artwork, and it's like, I always felt that way, but never understood or had a way to express what I was feeling,
So as an artist during these times, if you had the time, if someone, said, here's some funding, just take some time off and, do a painting or something like that in reflection of the times that we're in right now, what would your painting look like?
I'm not going to say, because I'm working on some stuff.
Okay, just make something up.
I would do something that would kind of reflect my journey with fatherhood, my perspective as a father, and kind of what kind of encapsulates that. So some kind of way to feed that into the work. Even if it was like a series of photographs that kind of like a journal of just the time that's went by. A lot of times we do stuff and we have no receipts and or evidence of our journeys or things that we saw happening, but to kind of watch your children grow up in front of you and kind of be in the moments and capture moments and times with them along the way, I think that would be powerful. So something like that would be fun to do.
Sounds good.
Yeah. How about yourself?
Well, I am sadly connected to like all the stuff that's going on in Florida. And I think that, over the years I've thought about, since I'm so far away from, home, I've thought about how I would do like a documentary or something based on, when the celebrities like Sammy Davis Jr. and all of those folks performed on Miami Beach.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't stay in the Fountain Blues and all of that. So they would go over to Overtown, which was like, they used to call that like, kind of like a little Harlem, And so there were hotels there that they were able to, obviously stay in. Overtown was a Black neighborhood. So they were able to stay there. They were able to entertain, people that looked like them.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to eat. It was like home for them. And so I heard those stories, when I was growing up, and I was always like, yeah, a documentary about that would be cool. But now it's bigger than that. Now it's all of that is being erased, and the next generations that come up sadly won't know unless their family is, kind of fueling them with that information. But we're not the ones that we need to worry about as much as we need to worry about people that are of different cultures, understanding the perspective of, what Miami was. My mom's still here, and that makes me sad to see her relive everything. I'm like, you can't erase that. You can't erase a people, so, and that's exactly what's going on there. So for me, it would be something that is relatable to Miami, and the Miami that my family was raised in and what I grew up in. And obviously it would be Florida, but Florida has always had their certain cities that were segregated on purpose and racist on purpose, and did a lot of hangings and all of that kind of stuff. So Florida was never great. You know what I mean? Like, you could think about maybe the history of the reason why a lot of African Americans landed there because of the jobs,
right?
In Miami, and that, coming from different places. My folks are originally from Georgia. You know what I mean? So like, you go where the jobs are, right. But within those walls, it was sad because it was segregated. It was a segregated environment, but it was what they knew. But within those walls were doctors and lawyers and, longshoremen. My grandfather was a longshoreman, so there were folks thriving, and then there's that concept of people say sometimes desegregation was the worst thing that happened because we were thriving in those communities, less crime, stuff like that. So for me, it would have to be about Florida. It would have to be. It wouldn't be for Floridians. It would be for anybody that's outside of that state that doesn't understand the contributions and sacrifices that were made. I went to a school that was a high school that was multicultural. So it's not like Miami wasn't based on that. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't that kind of perspective of what people saw when they were growing up. And a lot of people did. We went to school in areas, that that were diverse is what I was saying. So for it to be changing so rapidly the way that it is now, it's just sad. So that's what I would do. I would do some kind of art piece or some kind of documentary or something of the contributions that were made, that would ultimately be produced as an archive for people to, kind of, study, down the line or something. Because, I mean, they're not going to have any books to read. And you go to school to be a teacher. You study to be a teacher. You go all the way up to that level, and then the governor's like, yeah, we're gonna tie your hands. You're not gonna be allowed to do what you love or what you went to school for, all of those things. So yeah,
that'd be dope. You should definitely do that. We have to do more stuff, and I have so many different conversations. I'm trying to think who I was talking to. It might have been Drew, but we were discussing something along those lines about how we just have to take the responsibility to do those kind of things. You don't have to be on a big scale, but we just have to do it, because really, if we depend on others, outside of our culture to, teach our culture or mention our culture or tell the truth about our culture and stuff, it'll never happen. It's always going to be a perspective that's going to be kind of tainted because, they may not feel the same way about you as you feel about you. And so we just got to get in the habit of documenting things. That's the only reason why I really started the podcast stuff, not only just to talk to about movies and stuff, but even the podcast I have that's just talking with conversation with different people like yourself. Is so we could have a track of something, so we could have some stories that just wasn't necessarily, because sometimes the narrative is always the same thing. Sometimes you learn so much about what's going on in the world just by a general conversation about something that you both like, that's of the times. And we got to make our own capsules, and we got to be in charge of them. We got to have our own. If we don't want to have them, make them and do them and share them and pass them along, then government or nobody else can't take them away,
I think that's the key to what we were saying as far as going off of the artist's perspective, but just as a human being, I think it's our obligation and duty to just keep talking about these stories and make sure that our kids know about it, because, I think we talked about this before. It's going to be debates for them. People are going to tell them that's not true, this doesn't exist, and all of those kind of things. So we have to doubly prepare them. Here's your truth, here's your history, and be prepared for the fight. You can either call people in. Well, why do you feel that way? What information do you have that is factual, against my history here?
Right.
What's going to change that? And you can call them in a sense to get them to understand, or, have them repeat what they said, and then maybe they get I really don't have the truth. This is just something that, I heard over the years. You can call people out right on the spot and say you're wrong, but you have to be prepared for a fight. Or you could just walk away from it. You can just leave it just as it is.
I think that we have a lot of good examples how people lock their culture in and don't let other people mess with it. So even if we don't know how to do it ourselves, we have good examples. We have a roadmap to kind of go the same route with certain things in place. That's always a constant that we have control over to make sure that they're unmessed with and stuff, just like other cultures do the same, because they're not letting that be told by anybody else. They're not letting anybody act like that wasn't the thing, and they'll get on you and on it quickly. And so we have to have that same, we got to do the same for self, because yeah, it's interesting, but that would be beautiful if you did something like that and just had an archive. Even if you had a YouTube page that had all different stories that different people submitted, or you did some, and some people did some talking about their story or what was going on. And sometimes stuff like that be forever, and it'd be the kind of stuff that nobody thinks to look at, but that saves them later, and it'd be like that was the time capsule. And it didn't have to be a movie that was in a theater that a studio bought and decide not to release anymore, or make it disappear, or all that craziness. Sometimes small is big because it's yours.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and please like and subscribe. Be sure to check out past and future episodes of this show, along with my other shows entitled the Movie Bench Quarterbacking Podcast and the Jay and Podcast, available now on all streaming platforms. Until next time, peace.